Waitress's kindness sparks a billionaire's unbelievable decision. Her life will never be the same. Welcome to today's captivating tale, inspired by the intriguing title, A Waitress's Kindness Sparks a Billionaire's Unbelievable Decision. Her life will never be the same. From the very first moment of our story, you will be drawn into a world teeming with mystery, compassion, and fate-altering secrets. Each chapter unfolds with unexpected twists and profound choices that shape destiny in the most astonishing ways. Get ready for a whirlwind of conspiracies, heartfelt bonds, and tense showdowns that teeter on the edge of calamity. Hold on tight, as every turn promises to leave you breathless and craving to uncover the truth behind each surprising event. Before we dive in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. Celeste Carmichael lived by a personal mantra: kindness first, no questions asked. Her upbringing in a small Midwestern town taught her the value of compassion, especially when least expected. She had recently moved to Chicago and found a humble job at a quaint diner called Anderson's Bistro, sandwiched between a century-old bakery and a shuttered bookstore. The worn sign above the diner's door belied the warm smiles that greeted customers inside, a welcome reminiscent of simpler days. Little did Celeste know that her friendliness and gentle spirit would mark the beginning of a life-altering journey beyond her wildest imaginings. On a chilly afternoon when Chicago's famed Lake Michigan winds cut through layers of clothes, a sudden commotion caught Celeste's attention at the diner's entrance. An older man, unshaven, trembling, and clad in a threadbare coat, tried to slip inside unnoticed. He seemed equal parts desperate and apologetic. Without hesitation, Celeste guided him to a vacant table by the heater, setting down a cup of steaming coffee before he could ask. That single act, an unspoken vow to show kindness, became the first step toward a whirlwind of events that even she could never have predicted. Her manager, Rita, glanced over warily. The diner was steady that day, and seating a seemingly homeless individual in plain view of other customers raised eyebrows. But Celeste paid no heed to the hush that fell over the small crowd. She knew the man needed warmth, comfort, and perhaps a hot meal. Summoning her courage, she brought a bowl of hearty minestrone soup and discreetly placed it before him with a soft smile. Suddenly, a group of 3 customers at a booth began whispering amongst themselves. One man complained loudly, "Why are you serving him if he can't pay?" Another snorted in mock disgust. The tension swelled within the diner, but Celeste, poised and compassionate, leaned in closer to the older man and whispered, "Don't worry, just eat. You're safe here." Her eyes blazed with defiance toward the judgment radiating from the other side of the room. What she didn't realize was that a silent observer in a shadowy corner was taking in every detail of her selfless act, and this observer was no ordinary diner patron. He was Bartholomew "Bart" Harrison, a reclusive billionaire rumored to keep out of the public eye at all costs. Some said he inherited old money from a lineage that traced back to the steel giants of Pittsburgh. Others whispered that he'd multiplied his already vast wealth through risky real estate deals, quietly buying out prime lands in Chicago, New York, and beyond. Celeste had never heard of him, nor had she ever imagined a man of his caliber would walk into Anderson's Bistro on a random weekday afternoon. But here he was, seated at a small table in the far corner, peering from behind a crisp copy of the Chicago Tribune. Bart observed Celeste's unwavering compassion, impressed that not once did she wonder about the financial cost of her kindness. He watched the discomfort among certain customers and how Celeste faced it all with a calm, gracious spirit. In his experience, people who encountered wealth often grew too comfortable or too calculating. To him, what Celeste had done was truly extraordinary, to give without expectation. He felt a stirring he hadn't felt in years, a desire to connect, to know more. But he also had secrets of his own, and the weight of those secrets was about to collide with Celeste's unassuming life, igniting a chain reaction nobody could have foreseen. When closing time approached, the older man hastily moved to leave, tugging his tattered coat tighter around himself. Celeste intercepted him, slipping a few bills into his calloused hand, urging him to find a warm place to stay the night. He started to refuse, but tears rimmed his eyes as he realized this young waitress was offering him the kind of generosity that had been absent from his life for far too long. Uttering a raw, trembling thank you, he disappeared into the cold dusk. Bart set down his newspaper, signaled for the check, and quietly left $100 bill under his coffee cup. Celeste hurried over, thinking a customer had made a mistake, but discovered a small note scrawled on the napkin beneath the bill. Kindness deserves to be rewarded, B.H. Although she didn't know the full significance of those initials, an unexpected warmth and amazement coursed through her. Rita, spotting the money, muttered about how rare it was to see such generosity in a diner like theirs. Celeste smiled, pondering the strange chain of events that day, but she never once suspected how dramatically her life would soon change. The next few days blurred into the standard rhythms of diner life. Celeste served endless cups of coffee, daily specials scrawled in chalk on the menu board, and kind words to passers-by who seemed to need a gentle smile. Occasionally, she remembered the odd man with the heavy coat and Bart, the mysterious patron who had scrawled a cryptic note on a napkin. She felt drawn to that moment, as if it whispered hints of an uncharted future. But she remained rooted in her routine, believing that the small acts of kindness she offered each day were reward enough. Yet a sliver of tension glimmered in the background. Another server, Bryn, seemed to keep an unusual eye on Celeste. She had overheard Bryn complaining once to the cook, "It's not fair. She's new here, and everyone's fawning over her. Does she think she's some kind of angel?" The little jealousy didn't faze Celeste, but she could sense Bryn's growing resentment. Meanwhile, Rita tried to keep the atmosphere cheery, though every so often Celeste caught her boss staring off as if weighed down by an unspoken worry. Unbeknownst to Celeste, forces were in motion beyond the diner's walls, forces with power, resources, and hidden agendas that would soon converge on her unassuming life. One late evening, after wiping down the last table and putting the chairs up, Celeste bundled up for the walk to her small studio apartment. As she stepped out onto the sidewalk, she noticed a sleek, black limousine idling across the street, windows tinted dark as midnight. The engine purred softly, the brake lights forming two ominous red eyes peering at her. She hesitated, heart thudding in her chest, wary that the driver might be waiting for someone else. Then the back window rolled down a mere few inches, revealing an outline she couldn't quite distinguish in the darkness. A slip of paper fluttered out of the window and landed at her feet. Alarmed yet curious, she picked it up to find a single sentence: "Anderson's Diner, 7 a.m. tomorrow. We need to talk." There was no signature, only a symbol at the bottom resembling a small crest. Suddenly, the window rolled back up and the limo pulled away into the night. Celeste stood there, stunned. She flipped the paper back and forth, trying to make sense of it. Anxiety roiled in her mind. Who needed to talk to her at 7 a.m.? And why the secrecy? That night, she slept fitfully, her thoughts swirling with possibilities. Could it be about the older man she'd helped? Had something gone wrong? Or was it connected to Bart, the generous stranger who left a mysterious note? She awoke before dawn, anxious but determined. She decided she would keep the meeting on her own terms. After showering and pulling on her work uniform, she headed to the diner early, bracing herself for anything. As she neared the entrance, the black limousine was already parked across the street, its doors ominously closed. Moments later, a tall, poised woman emerged clad in a tailored suit that screamed wealth and power. Without a word, the woman strode toward Celeste, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Hello, Miss Carmichael. My name is Michaela Brooks. Mr. Harrison would like a few words with you at your earliest convenience. May I have a moment of your time?" Celeste's heart began to pound. Mr. Harrison, Bart Harrison. The puzzle pieces fell into place. Before she could respond, Michaela extended a business card embossed with a refined crest, Harrison and Blackwell Enterprises. It was the same symbol she had seen on the note. The gravity of the situation hit her like a strong gust of Chicago wind. Something monumental lay ahead. Michaela guided Celeste to a corner booth inside the diner, politely requesting they speak in private. Rita, glancing up from wiping the counter, was about to intervene, but paused when Michaela handed her a discreet note, presumably explaining the situation. Rita shrugged and slid back into the kitchen, seemingly placated. Celeste could hardly breathe as she sat opposite Michaela, trying to interpret the woman's stern demeanor. Leaning in, Michaela said, "Mr. Harrison witnessed your kindness to a man in need. He was deeply impressed by your lack of hesitation and wanted to learn more about you. Through some inquiries, we discovered you are originally from Linden Falls, that you studied journalism for 2 years before financial constraints forced you to drop out, and that you care for an ailing mother back home." Celeste's eyes widened at how thoroughly they had researched her. Something about it felt invasive, yet there was a compassion in Michaela's tone that tempered her alarm. "Mr. Harrison would like to extend a unique invitation," Michaela continued. "He wants you to join him at his estate just outside the city for a conversation. He believes your empathy might align with a philanthropic project he's undertaking." Celeste's mind reeled. She had never visited any estate, let alone that of a billionaire. Could this be a scam? But the mention of her mother's illness tugged at her heart, and the memory of Bart's handwritten note reminded her that, so far, his intentions had seemed genuine. Despite her deep reservations, Celeste felt a profound curiosity. Michaela offered to drive her to the estate after her shift ended, an arrangement Celeste cautiously accepted. Throughout the morning, she went about her usual diner tasks, mind buzzing. Bryn, shooting suspicious glances, muttered cynically about special treatment, while Rita looked on from behind the cash register, wondering if Celeste might soon leave the diner for good. When the clock hit 3, Celeste handed over her apron, grabbed her coat, and with hesitant steps, slid into the back seat of the sleek limousine that Michaela had waiting for her. The leather interior smelled of polished luxury. She had never experienced such opulence in her life. During the 30-minute drive, skyscrapers faded into the distance, replaced by tall trees and winding roads. A wrought iron gate, guarded by security, parted for them like a stage curtain. The estate was breathtaking, rolling lawns, marble fountains, and a driveway lined with ornamental hedges. Stepping out onto the gravel courtyard, Celeste inhaled the crisp air, nerves thrumming. Michaela guided her through a grand foyer whose chandelier glittered above a polished floor of Italian marble. Finally, they arrived in a conservatory filled with exotic plants and an air of tranquility. Bart Harrison stood there, admiring a rare orchid. He turned, smiled gently, and said, "I'm sorry to have summoned you this way, but some things cannot be left to chance." Sitting across from Bart in a plush, high-backed chair, Celeste found herself at a loss for words. She couldn't help but notice his refined posture and the undercurrent of quiet intensity in his gaze. He thanked her for coming, then launched into a story that made her heart pound. Bart confessed he had once been like the older man in the diner, cold, lonely, and wandering. He had not been impoverished, but rather emotionally destitute after personal tragedies, including the loss of his wife. Through that despair, he developed a passion for helping those who found themselves hopeless or marginalized. He had established a secret philanthropic project that worked with shelters, community centers, and mental health clinics. "I learned," he said solemnly, "that a simple act of kindness can ripple outward in astonishing ways. I saw how you took care of that gentleman in the diner without once asking for anything. That, Miss Carmichael, is the sort of empathy I want around me." Celeste's eyes brimmed with tears, touched by the raw vulnerability in his words. He explained that he needed someone trustworthy, with genuine compassion, to lead a special extension of his philanthropic efforts. He wanted it to remain low profile, away from prying media. "Would you," he asked, inhaling slowly, "consider working with me to establish a more personal, ground-level approach to helping people in need?" Shock rendered Celeste momentarily speechless. She had come to Chicago in search of hope, but never in her wildest dreams did she imagine an opportunity like this. Heart-pounding, she asked, "Why me? I'm just a waitress trying to make ends meet." Bart's eyes held an earnest conviction as he replied, "Because sincerity cannot be faked. You either have it or you don't. And I've seen enough to know you have it." Still, Celeste hesitated. Her mother's mounting medical bills weighed heavily on her mind. She didn't want to abandon the diner if it meant losing her only steady source of income. Almost reading her thoughts, Bart quietly offered a living wage that far exceeded anything she'd dreamed possible, plus assistance with her mother's care. The offer dangled before her, too good, too surreal. Could she trust him, or was she stumbling into a trap? A swirl of uncertainty and excitement left her trembling. "Let me think about it," she whispered. Bart nodded, admiring her caution. With a final handshake, he allowed Michaela to escort her home, leaving Celeste to wrestle with the life-altering proposal. Over the following week, Celeste continued at the diner, grappling day and night with Bart's astonishing offer. She confided in no one. Something inside warned her that any leak of this affair could trigger rumors or sabotage. Every day, though, she found a new reason to believe that fate was nudging her toward acceptance. Her mother's condition, the older man's grateful face, the unexpected generosity that had already materialized in her life, each felt like a sign. Then something dark happened. Late one afternoon, Celeste stepped out the back entrance of the diner to discard trash. She noticed a figure lurking by the dumpster Bryn. The co-worker's eyes flashed with resentment. "You think you're better than everyone? I saw that fancy woman talk to you. I know something's up," Bryn spat. Before Celeste could respond, Bryn's phone camera flashed. "You better believe I'll figure out what scam you're pulling." A cold shiver ran down Celeste's spine. She never realized Bryn was capable of such hostility. Shaken, she returned to the dining area, heart pounding. She dreaded that Bryn's jealousy or bitterness might jeopardize everything, especially if it reached Bart's ears or, worse, local gossip columns. She felt trapped between wanting to keep the diner job and the extraordinary future Bart had laid out for her. A few nights later, Celeste finally decided to meet Bart again. She dialed the number Michaela had left her, heart fluttering. True to her professional manner, Michaela scheduled a meeting the very next day at a discreet location, an elegant suite in the Waldorf Astoria, Chicago. Celeste arrived, wide-eyed, marveling at the chandelier-lit lobby and the staff's polished courtesy. Inside the suite, Bart stood by the window overlooking the city skyline, hands clasped behind his back. He offered her a seat near a table set with tea and delicate pastries. Nervously, Celeste accepted. She told him she was ready to hear more about his philanthropic vision, provided it truly was about uplifting others and not just a publicity stunt. Bart's laughter rumbled. "Publicity stunt? Believe me, I avoid the spotlight. People think I'm reclusive, but it's the only way I can maintain true focus on who needs help most. He opened a leather-bound folder, unveiling documents about shelters, scholarships, rehab centers, and mental health outreach programs under the umbrella of Harrison and Blackwell. "I want you to be my eyes and ears," he explained. "Your job is to visit these places, see what's truly needed, and ensure our funds are making an impact. In short, help me help others, without the typical bureaucracy and red tape." A spark of joy ignited in Celeste. This was exactly the kind of meaningful work she had always dreamed of, yet never believed possible. She told him she would accept, unaware that by doing so, she was painting a target on her back for hidden enemies. In the weeks that followed, Celeste transitioned out of Anderson's bistro. Rita was supportive, though visibly worried about losing her star employee. Bryn glowered more openly, lashing out with snide remarks at every chance, but Celeste tried to brush it off. As a parting gift, Rita threw a small farewell gathering in the diner, complete with a homemade cake. Clutching a modest bouquet of wildflowers, Celeste felt tears prick her eyes at the outpouring of love from the customers she had bonded with. Meanwhile, Bart set up an apartment for Celeste closer to the city's heart, an airy loft that dwarfed her old cramped studio. At first, the opulence of the new space overwhelmed her. She found herself wandering its sleek halls, remembering her humble roots, terrified of losing them. But each morning, she attended briefings at Bart's office, learning the ins and outs of philanthropic project management. Under Michaela's tutelage, she visited food banks, halfway houses, and community centers. Every day brought new insights into how dire the need was and how large Bart's heart truly seemed to be. Still, not everything was smooth sailing. Delayed deliveries, miscommunication, and a consistent shortfall of supplies in certain shelters began to raise Celeste's suspicions. Some facility managers complained that money promised by Bart's foundation never arrived. Curious, Celeste dug deeper, discovering that large sums were vanishing en route, as if siphoned off by some middleman. Determined, she decided to investigate, unaware that she was about to step into the crosshairs of a far more dangerous game. Her first confrontation came at a run-down shelter on the city's outskirts. The manager there, Miss Collins, showed Celeste the battered cots and near-empty pantry. "We were promised funds to fix the roof and restock supplies, but we haven't seen a dime." Confounded, Celeste logged onto the Foundation's accounting software. Bart had given her direct access and found that the funds were marked as paid. Where, then, had the money gone? A swirl of questions ravaged Celeste's mind as she systematically combed through records for patterns. Certain transactions had suspicious notations or missed references. Soon, a name popped up repeatedly: Lance Dillard, a mid-level executive within Harrison and Blackwell, responsible for overseeing distribution of philanthropic grants. It appeared Lance had been funneling money into shell accounts, disguised as consulting fees. Clutching the printed records, Celeste felt her heart pound. She had to alert Bart, but she also worried about the ramifications, especially if Lance had accomplices. Returning to the office that afternoon, Celeste found Bart in a tense meeting with business associates. She waited outside until he emerged, eyes weary. She wasted no time showing him the documents. His face darkened with anger and a flicker of genuine hurt. "I hired Lance 5 years ago. I trusted him. Are you absolutely certain about this?" Celeste nodded, pointing at the incriminating evidence. Bart clenched his jaw. "I'll handle this personally." Bart's initial reaction was swift. He arranged a private meeting with Lance, confronting him about the missing funds. Yet Lance denied everything, skillfully weaving excuses, forging documents on the spot to indicate legitimate disbursements. Bart, though angry, realized he needed airtight evidence if he wanted to bring official charges. He turned to Celeste, asking her to gather more proof discreetly. Meanwhile, Lance began to suspect Celeste's involvement. The tension in the office soared to new heights. Discomfort flickered in every corridor, employees choosing sides in hushed whispers. Inexplicable glances were thrown Celeste's way, as though people blamed her for stirring turmoil or exposing a festering secret. Michaela, loyal to Bart, supported Celeste's investigations, but worried for her safety. She suggested they hire private security, a notion Celeste initially resisted. She refused to believe that philanthropic work could become so perilous. But as phone calls from unknown numbers and cryptic text messages hinting "stay in your lane" or else started piling up, Celeste realized that sincerity and goodness could provoke malicious pushback when money and power were threatened. Simultaneously, a ghost from Celeste's past resurfaced. Bryn from the diner suddenly posted a string of social media messages accusing Celeste of conning a billionaire for personal gain. The post went viral in local circles, referencing the mysterious rich visitor and Celeste's abrupt departure from the diner. Celeste's name was dragged through the mud online. She felt her credibility slipping just when she needed it most to expose Lance's wrongdoing. Utterly shaken, Celeste rushed to Bart's office, tears stinging her eyes. "People are claiming I scammed you," she sobbed, showing him the hateful comments. She feared how it might hurt Bart's faith in her. To her surprise, he gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "There will always be people who tear you down when they see you rise. We'll endure it. Truth will prevail." Emboldened by Bart's reassurance, Celeste recommitted to unmasking Lance. Late one night, she snuck into the Foundation's records room, armed with a small flashlight. The office lights were dimmed, and only the hum of ventilation accompanied her footsteps. She meticulously sifted through stacks of paper files, searching for any bank statements or memos that might confirm the money trail. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked behind her. She spun around to see Lance looming in the doorway, face contorted with rage. "Looking for something?" he sneered. Her heart leapt into her throat. Lance advanced, snatching a folder from her hands. She tried to keep calm, mustering what courage she could find. "You can deny it all you want, but we have proof," she warned, voice trembling. He scoffed and leaned close enough for her to smell the pungent mix of cologne and anger. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. Get out if you know what's good for you." He flipped off the flashlight and vanished into the dark corridor, leaving Celeste shaking in terror. In the days after that chilling encounter, Celeste took care to never walk alone, especially late at night. Bart, outraged that Lance had harassed her, suspended him pending further investigation. However, Lance struck back by threatening a lawsuit for defamation if Bart didn't compensate him handsomely. The company's lawyers scrambled, uncertain of how to proceed without unimpeachable evidence. Celeste was at her wit's end. She worried about her mother's health back home, the swirling rumors about her own character, and now the looming danger from Lance's circle. Some nights she'd lie awake, questioning whether she had made the right choice accepting Bart's offer. Yet each time she remembered the battered faces at the shelters and the children in halfway houses yearning for hope, she felt renewed purpose. She refused to abandon them to Lance's machinations. Bart, seeing her resolve, quietly assembled a specialized audit team. Their job, track every last cent flowing from Harrison and Blackwell's philanthropic arm. Celeste joined them. Day after day, hunched over spreadsheets, bank statements, and digital ledgers. The deeper they delved, the more patterns emerged: shell corporations tied to Lance, large transfers to offshore accounts. The evidence was becoming undeniable. But as the net tightened around Lance, new threats emerged, including one that would strike perilously close to Celeste's heart. One early morning, Celeste's phone buzzed with an unknown number. Picking up hesitantly, she heard heavy breathing. Then a raspy voice said, "If you value your mother's life, drop the investigation." The line clicked dead, leaving Celeste paralyzed. Her mother, could they have found out about her family in Linden Falls? The mere thought that someone would threaten an innocent woman's life to protect their illicit dealings sent Celeste's mind spiraling. Terrified, she reached out to the local police in her hometown, urging them to keep an eye on her mother's house. Then she broke down in tears as she explained the threat to Bart. Within hours, Bart arranged private security for Celeste's mother. The expression on his face was unlike anything Celeste had seen before: fury, regret, and a protective instinct that reaffirmed his genuine concern. "We'll end this, Celeste," he vowed, voice taut with emotion. "No more threats, no more corruption." As word of the threat spread among Bart's closest circle, Michaela encouraged Celeste to go to the press to have the truth about Lance's scheme exposed publicly. However, Bart believed it best to work quietly with authorities, ensuring they had an irrefutable case before going public. Torn between wanting to protect her mother and seeking justice, Celeste agreed to a more covert approach. Every step was fraught with anxiety, but momentum was finally building toward a day of reckoning. Unknown to Celeste, Bryn had continued stoking the flames online, determined to paint her as a fraud. Bryn posted misleading photos and half-baked conspiracies, claiming Celeste had manipulated a philanthropic billionaire to secure wealth for herself. The story spread like wildfire, fueled by trolls and sensationalist gossip. In an ironic twist, Celeste's very act of kindness at the diner, once heralded by local patrons, was now twisted into claims that she had staged an entire spectacle to reel in a rich target. Late one night, Celeste scrolled through the vitriol on social media, tears blurring her vision. She felt physically ill reading the accusations. She wanted to scream the truth, that she was fighting tooth and nail to save philanthropic funds from theft, not to pocket them. But she had promised Bart secrecy for the sake of the ongoing investigation. Alone in her loft, she sank to the floor, hugging her knees, terrified that the lies would overshadow everything she had worked so hard to accomplish. Yet she found a fragile thread of courage. The knowledge that the real criminals would eventually be exposed gave her reason to keep going. Then, a miraculous moment of grace arrived. Out of nowhere, an unexpected witness stepped forward, someone who had worked closely with Lance and could verify the shell accounts. This was the final piece of the puzzle that Bart's investigative team needed. As the official evidence mounted, the stage was set for Lance's downfall. All the while, Celeste braced for the final confrontation, praying it would come before any more threats materialized. The day of reckoning dawned with a crisp, biting wind that howled outside Bart's skyscraper headquarters. Representatives from the FBI and local authorities quietly arrived, armed with warrants. Bart, Michaela, and Celeste watched from a secure conference room as Lance was led away in handcuffs. His glare could have cut glass, but the real shock came when he spat out the name of his co-conspirator, Bryn. It seemed Bryn, harboring bitterness since Celeste's abrupt departure from the diner, had become easy prey for Lance. The two had collaborated to paint Celeste as the real culprit, planning to deflect blame if the stolen funds were ever discovered. Bryn had fed Lance updates on Celeste's personal life, hoping to sabotage her in the eyes of the public. She was even the one who initiated the threat calls to Celeste's mother, unwittingly crossing a legal line far more severe than petty rumor-mongering. When Celeste heard Bryn's confession, she felt a swirl of sadness and anger. She never imagined that her kindness would evoke such fierce jealousy. But the truth was out, and the authorities wasted no time rounding up Bryn for further questioning. She too was arrested, trembling and humiliated. The final shock for Celeste was learning that Bryn had tried to extort hush money from Bart's foundation as well, offering to stop the smear campaign if they paid her off. Justice had arrived in dramatic fashion. In the aftermath, the media latched onto the story of corporate theft within a philanthropic foundation. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, clamoring for any detail on the scandal. Bart, typically a recluse, made a rare public statement. He denounced Lance's actions, emphasizing the foundation's commitment to integrity and announcing Celeste's promotion to Director of Community Outreach. As cameras flashed, Celeste felt a knot of anxiety. She wasn't accustomed to the spotlight, but Bart assured her it was necessary to restore trust in their charitable endeavors. True to form, cynics questioned Celeste's rise to prominence, but a flood of testimonials poured in from shelter directors and families aided by her personal outreach. One by one, the people she had helped came forward, a single mother who received emergency funds for food and housing, a teenage boy rescued from the streets, a rehabilitated veteran who found mental health support. Each story chipped away at the twisted narrative spun by Bryn and Lance. The diner fiasco that once cast Celeste in a villainous light was replaced by the truth. Her unwavering kindness was no act. Meanwhile, Bart quietly restored the stolen funds to each impacted shelter. The older man from Anderson's bistro, the one who first sparked Celeste's compassionate gesture, was eventually located and given the medical care and transitional housing he so desperately needed. All these ripples of good were set in motion by a single bowl of soup on a cold day. Months later, on a serene summer evening, Celeste found herself standing at the same diner's entrance. The weathered sign squeaked above the door in a gentle breeze. She had decided to visit her old workplace, not out of nostalgia alone, but to remind herself where everything began. Inside, Rita beamed, quickly ushering her to a seat. The place was quieter than before, no more suspicious stares, no more clandestine watchers in corners. She ordered a cup of coffee and gazed out the window, reflecting on how drastically her life had changed. Bart's philanthropic mission was thriving under her new leadership, transparent and well-organized. Bryn had confessed to her crimes and, after a plea deal, prepared for her sentence. Lance faced a hefty prison term for fraud and intimidation. Karmic retribution had played out. As Celeste sipped her coffee, she sighed deeply, letting go of the months of stress and heartbreak. She looked up to see Rita slip a small note onto the table. "Thank you for believing in kindness. You saved my business once when I was about to give up, just by smiling and showing up every day. Some days, that's all it takes." Celeste smiled, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She realized, in that moment, that the purest forms of goodness have the power to transform not just one life, but the entire world around it. This was the fulfilling karmic circle she never anticipated when she had placed that first cup of coffee in front of a stranger. Thank you for joining us for this extraordinary tale, where a simple act of kindness sparks a sequence of astonishing twists, culminating in well-deserved justice and redemption. From Celeste's compassionate moment at the diner to her courageous stand against corruption, we've witnessed how empathy can reshape destinies and transform even the most cynical hearts. If you found this story suspenseful and inspiring, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you riveting narratives filled with hope, tension, and karmic resolutions. Spread the message that even the smallest kindness holds the power to spark monumental change, one life at a time.